Welcome to the Fantasy Forge. In this video we'll be starting a new series where we focus on modular buildings. This one's about the floors. First things first, I take my XPS board and I cut it down into 8" by 8" by 3 8" pieces. Next I take a steel ruler and a biro and I mark off 1" increments. Once I've drawn out all my inch increments on all four sides, I'll then use my steel ruler and my biro to join them together in nice straight lines. This will create a cross-hatched pattern which will represent flagstones. When I do this, I make sure not to push too hard as this can damage the surface of the foam. 2 passes is always better than 1, and it's always best once you've gone over it once to go over it again without the ruler and tip the pen a little bit so you've got more of an angle. It will help to bevel the edge of each of the flagstones as I demonstrate here. Next up, I get my tin foil and I scrunch it into a ball. This is extra strength tin foil. The normal stuff is too weak. You'll find that one side is usually rougher than the other and is good for making deep indentations. 1 pass with the smoother side, and then 1 pass with the rougher side for extra detail, and then once around all the edges with the smoother side. You'll find that's usually enough detail for a dry brushing later. For the other side, I mark off 1 centimeter increments along 2 opposed sides. Once these are in place, I'll connect them with lateral lines, and these will represent the floorboards. Yet again, 2 passes is better than 1. Make sure you're connecting the opposed dots so you don't end up with wonky lines. Once you've done all of those, it's time to start thinking about separating them into smaller boards. Start off by choosing an area and working the pen to create a couple of grooves. Then work 1 board at a time, separating them up into smaller planks. Once you've done that, it's high time that you have a second look and add a little bit more effort, because usually it will need a little bit of definition. Once the boards are perfectly defined, it's time to find a tool to make nail holes. Here I've taken a lollipop stick and some toothpicks and hot glued them together so that I can space out my nail holes 2 at a time. This saves a lot of time whilst making these look a lot more real. Double check to make sure you haven't missed any like I did here. Once you're happy with how it all looks, it's time to get a wire brush and start to texture. Add a little bit of pressure at first to see how well your foam takes the pressure and gives it a decent wood grain. If you find it's not making enough of a mark, press harder. Here you can see it's detailed it nicely, and on the other side a nice stone texture, and that's an 8 by 8 grid ready to go. Here I set up my hot wire jig so that it's the exact width of my styrene board, and then I mill down some of my other boards so that I end up with a square long rod. Once that's cut to size, I then get to work texturing it just like I did with the planking. Work from one end to the other with a nice brass wire brush, and it should give you a decent wood grain. Then I'd suggest you cut it down into 2 centimeter chunks. This will give you enough to support the walls of your upper story and protrude a little bit so that you can see the detail. The way I've done it is with 12 supports, 3 on each side. To make these supports, you'll need to take some kind of sharp metal pin or rod, preferably an awl, and mark a hole straight into the middle of each of these supports. Mark it off so that you don't go too deep. Twist as you push the metal into the foam and it will stop it snagging. Then I take a blade and I bevel the end just so there's a bit more interest. I then take standard cocktail sticks and snip them in half using side cutters, and then using Mod Podge or any white glue, you can glue these toothpicks into the holes, and that will support both the exterior of the upper building, and it will help to make a good bond with these supports to the floor. Make sure to get the glue right down into the hole, and then clean it up a little bit, and then set it to one side to dry. I stand mine up in a piece of foam so that it clears up my desk and I don't end up with damaged pieces. Now, using the same metal rod, I'll make incisions into my board just offset from every 2-inch mark. Make sure that your awl is clear all the way to the bottom so that you can make an insertion that is longer than the cocktail stick supports. This way you won't have any resistance when you need to put them in. And using some that I've made earlier, I demonstrate how easily these go in. Here you can see what it looks like, and this will support the upper floor perfectly. Here I demonstrated by putting it on top of one of my other pieces that I've already completed. Once painted up, that will look just like support beams. Thanks for watching, like, share and subscribe, and check back for more progress on this project.